to this very important PON for our team. But before we get started, I just want to introduce myself, and our team members will introduce themselves as they present. So my name is Craig Conley. I'm the Director of Innovation and Research at NYSERDA. Our team includes the hydrogen and clean fuels team that you'll be hearing from today, but multiple other teams that work on buildings, technologies, the grid, and multiple other areas that all lead towards our total sort of focus at NYSERDA, which is climate tech and clean energy. I'm really excited to introduce our team, and I'll be passing it over to our program manager for hydrogen and clean fuels, high-end stuff. And happy to pass it on to you.
Thank you, Craig. I think we'll just give another 30 seconds probably to get other people join. Please just wait for a little bit. Thank you. Okay, so let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone. This is the webinar to support the recently NYSERDA released hydrogen solicitation PON 5322. So let's get to next page. John, please. Before we start, just a couple of housekeeping rules here. When you join this webinar, you are muted. So throughout the process, you are muted. If you have any questions or comments, please use the Q&A section to submit your questions. You can submit now or anytime during this webinar. We will address the questions at the end of this webinar. If you have any technical questions, either use Q&A or other buttons or how to join, etc., please contact John. His email is here on this page. All right, next page, please. So here's our agenda for today. We'll talk about, in general, what's New York's belief on the hydrogen opportunity and its role. Then we'll focus mostly on this PON overview first, and then talk about the challenge areas covered under this PON. Then we'll save time for the Q&A at the end. Again, a reminder, if you have any questions and comments, please use the Q&A button, which you can find at the lower right corner on the WebEx window, and submit the questions. We'll address them at the end. Next page, please. Okay, so you don't have to use a screenshot or jot down any notes that we talk about today. Today's slides will be posted on our hydrogen program webpage, nyserda.ny.gov/hydrogen. Today's webinar is also going to be recorded. The record will also be posted on the same website. We will compile a frequent asked question list. It will be posted on this PON 5322 solicitation page. That's the same page you will find all the solicitation document, as well as the link how you submit your proposal. If your questions are not answered today, or if you have additional questions after today's webinar, please send your question to this designated email pon5322@nyserda.ny.gov. We will monitor this email account and respond to your questions promptly. Additionally, if you want to be connected with us to get future announcement, please go to that Clean Hydrogen website and subscribe to our email distribution list. Next page, please. So I would like also take this opportunity to make an announcement. If you are interested to become NYSERDA's hydrogen and clean fuel program as our technical reviewer for either this solicitation or the future solicitation, please fill out online form, which you can find on that Clean Hydrogen website. We'll post it in a couple of weeks at most. If you are selected, the technical reviewer will be assigned to a scoring committee and will be responsible to review the R&D proposals submitted to NYSERDA. Keep in mind that technical reviewers must sign the NDA and has to have no conflict of interest before you can access the proposals. If you are going to submit the proposal to this PON, then you will not be considered as technical reviewer, just to make that clear. Okay, next page, please. On this page, I'll briefly talk about what we believe New York's hydrogen opportunity. On the top right-hand side, you will see that New York has been committed to very aggressive climate act. We sometimes call it 70 by 30, 100 by 40, which means by 2030, we expect to get 70% our renewable electricity on the grid. And by 2040, we expect to have 100% zero emission electricity in New York State, and accompanied by other specific renewable targets for solar, wind, and energy storage. To achieve this kind of aggressive climate goal, we believe that hydrogen will potentially play a critical role in New York in terms of decarbonize, hard to electrify sectors, ensure that we have a reliable grid, and provide resilient solutions when we need them. By 2030, we expect the initial market adoption of clean hydrogen in several areas, such as medium heavy-duty fuel cell electric vehicle, high-temperature industrial process. We also expect additional end uses, including district heating, and non-road transportation, such as in aviation and rail. In addition, even though with aggressively managed electrical efficiency, we expect that New York State will convert to a winter peaking system by 2035. Those are the time that when we will expect to have lower renewable generation, and there will be days in a row that the renewable output may not meet the demand, especially in the cold winter in the Northeast region. So our analysis shows that New York will need at least 18 gigawatt of zero emission carbon, will have zero emission dispatchable energy storage by 2040. At least 18 gigawatt of that capacity is needed. So with that, we expect that by 2050, New York will need probably in the range of 5 to 11% of our final total energy demand is going to come from hydrogen. So that's our estimation based on the integration analysis, which is the comprehensive analysis that we conducted to support our final scoping plan, which was published last December. So you look at the chart on the lower right-hand side that shows hydrogen may be used in various sectors. In order for hydrogen to play such an important role, we expect that continued R&D will be the key for enable these kind of roles for hydrogen. Next page, please. On this page, I'll briefly talk about, in addition to the integration analysis and scoping plan that were published and finalized last December, NYSERDA has also been conducting the comprehensive hydrogen strategy for New York State. That effort has been going on for more than a year. It includes 3 work streams with various consultants that we've been working with. So we work with MREL on the hydrogen market and technology analysis. That includes understand the hydrogen role in production, demand, and storage distribution along the entire supply chain. Understand the R&D capabilities and the gap and opportunities in New York. Understand the cost and performance for the production and application and how to optimize the hydrogen ecosystem in New York. Secondly, we work with E3 to understand policy options, which include to evaluate different policy established in different regions. And evaluate the strengths and weakness for different policy options. In addition, under that work stream, we also analyze the air quality and emission reductions that related to hydrogen. Thirdly, we work with energetics and IEC to understand the economic and supply chain development associated with the hydrogen, including the different companies currently or in the future that can play a role in hydrogen space in New York. What are the jobs impact associated with the hydrogen growth here? So let's go to the next page, please, John. So now let's switch to this particular R&D solicitation, PON 5322. A quick overview here. We are committed to have at least up to $10 million for the proposals The goal is to provide cost share for the proposals for whoever is going to apply federal funding award. Either you are in the middle of the process, apply the federal award, or you have already applied the federal award in the hydrogen space. I want to point out the final NYSERDA award is contingent upon the proposals successfully secure and executing the federal funding contract. So that means even though you may get award letter from us, if you don't secure the federal funding or your federal contract is not signed and executed, you will not be able to get NYSERDA funding. The proposal for this PON is due on June 28th, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That's a firm due date and the time. After that 3 p.m., the system will not be able to accept any proposals. So please be on time. This solicitation includes 4 challenge areas as I list here. 1, the hydrogen application to decarbonize industrial process heat. 2, clean hydrogen production and integration with renewable energy. 3, mitigate the NOx emissions. Number 4, hydrogen storage technology. We will have pages later on to talk about each of the challenge areas in detail. On the end of this page, I have listed here some examples of federal funding. All of them, we believe, have some of the challenge areas as listed on this page that's supported by this solicitation. However, there may be other federal funding opportunities that may also cover some of the 4 challenge areas. You are encouraged to, again, apply for our PON if you have proposals sent to this federal funding or additional federal funding that covers similar range. Next page, please. Okay, this page talks about the funding categories. For this solicitation, we provide funding for 3 categories. It says ABC on this page, feasibility studies, product development, or the demonstration project. Each of them has different range of technical readiness level. And the funding, the maximum NYSERDA funding per award is based on the technical readiness or the funding categories. Here on this page, we're showing the maximum NYSERDA funding in the dollar amount. Please keep in mind that this solicitation, we do not specify the funding, minimum funding by NYSERDA in a percentage. It is specified as the maximum dollar amount as shown on this page. Next page, please. Okay, I'll talk about the eligibility requirement for this PON. So first, you have to apply for federal funding, either in the process or already applied for. There's a funding contingency I already mentioned. Second, there's a New York eligibility. I will explain here. So first, if you are a New York entity, means you have a physical location in New York State, then you can apply to this PON either as prime or subrecipient, and for any of the 3 funding categories that I just mentioned on the previous page. If you are not a New York State entity, but you are working on a pilot project, demonstration project, and that project site is in New York State, then you can apply to this PON either as a prime or subrecipient. If you don't fit in any of these 2 categories, meaning you are not a New York State entity and you're not working on a project with a site in New York, then you're not eligible to apply as the primary. But you can apply as a subrecipient with somebody else that fit the first 2 requirements. All right, next page, please. Okay, required document. So this has been clearly marked in the solicitation. I just want to emphasize here. On top of this page, we're showing the mandatory document that each proposal has to include. The most important is the attachment A. That's the proposal narrative, and that is your opportunity to explain to us your project in a holistic way. Please respond to the question in the narrative, keeping in mind the evaluation criteria that was laid out in the solicitation. Make sure your answer clearly differentiate yourself according to the evaluation criteria. Attachment B is the PowerPoint for executive summary. We mostly will just use it for our internal evaluation. Make sure you don't include confidential information on that executive summary page. And then please attach to the technical readiness level or commercial readiness level calculation sheet. As it states, this is a cost share for federal funding. So please include your concept paper that you submit to the federal funding agency. If your proposal has been awarded or you have passed the concept paper stage and you got the encourage or discourage notice from the federal funding agency, please include that. We also have a requirement for Executive Order 16 acknowledgement. There are some optional documents. If you do have any conflict of interest, you will disclose that and attach it. If you have additional supporting document that you think will differentiate and make your proposal stronger, such as letter of commitment and letter of support, etc., please attach them. But don't attach more than 10 pages total under this supporting document. Next page, please. Next, I will pass it to Fernando from our hydrogen clean fuel team. He will talk more details about the challenge areas. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today, and it's certainly an exciting time to be working in the hydrogen space, given all the movement at both the state and federal level on this front. As my program manager and I had mentioned, my name is Fernando Villafuerte. I'm an Empire State Fellow who's working on the hydrogen clean fuel team, and I worked on helping to define the technical scope of the solicitation, and I'll be walking you through the 4 challenge areas in the solicitation, providing brief context and examples of the challenges we're facing and the problems we're trying to address, and potentially eligible projects for our solicitation. So I'd like to begin by taking a look at our first challenge area, hydrogen applications to decarbonize industrial process heat. And a very quick primer, in New York, industry accounts for about 9% of our state's greenhouse gas emissions. And a lot of this is owed to difficult to electrify industrial heat processes. We have a breakdown of these processes in the state by grade in figure 1 here on the right. And the split is between high temperature processes, which we define as above 500 degrees Celsius, mid temperature processes, which we define between 100 and 500 degrees Celsius, and low temperature processes, which we define below 100 degrees Celsius. And together, these mid and high temperature heat grade applications, which we're interested in, constitute 60% of the total heat consumed here in the state. And the difficulty in decarbonizing these sectors in the absence of any robust electrification solutions boils down to finding substitutes for the fossil fuels currently used to generate this heat, namely natural gas. But this is where hydrogen could play a natural role. A gas, much like natural gas, it can be deployed and combusted to produce the necessary combustion heat in many of these industrial processes, and do so without producing carbon emissions. And though it could potentially serve this niche, there are certain challenges related to the deployment of hydrogen that preclude it from being used directly as a drop-in solution in many processes, and these are owed to hydrogen's unique properties, some of which include the higher adiabatic flame temperature, wider flammability window than natural gas, and the propensity for hydrogen molecules to diffuse into an array of materials and embrittle them. So in light of these, we're looking at technologies and proposals that help address some of these issues in industrial deployment of hydrogen gas. Some of these could potentially include novel materials and coatings that can withstand hydrogen embrittlement and the operation of industrial processes at high temperatures that deploy hydrogen, new designs for furnaces, ovens, and kilns that could safely and efficiently combust hydrogen, and processes that also potentially look at using hydrogen not only as a means to replace natural gas, but also as a decarbonizing process input. An example of this would be something like direct reduced iron for steel making. Moving on to the next challenge area. Next slide, please. we come to clean hydrogen production and integration with renewable resources. And as Hyan mentioned earlier, when she was giving the overview of the challenges and opportunities the state faced in light of our climate law and our scoping plan, we expect to have 70% renewable electricity by 2030 and 100% zero emissions electricity by 2040. In addition to this, we have very ambitious goals for renewable generation. One example of that being the 9 gigawatts of offshore wind that we're aiming to build by 2035, along with 10 gigawatts of distributed solar by 2030. And this increased footprint of renewables on our grid presents an opportunity to produce green electrolytic hydrogen, that is hydrogen sourced through the electrochemical splitting of water through renewably powered processes. Now, electrolysis of water has been known for a long time. The scientific principle has been understood since the 1700s, but being able to produce this kind of hydrogen at scale is relatively new and not as robust as currently compared to currently existing fossil fuels-based technologies like steam methane are reforming. And part of the challenges in this space stem from the scarcity of certain materials that we need for hydrogen electrolysis, namely in the electrolyzer technologies that we use to drive those electrochemical processes, that electrochemical process of splitting water, materials for the catalysts that are needed for those processes, that those are scarce. There are also questions regarding durability of electrolyzers. One particular instance, proton exchange or polymer electrolyte membranes, which are noted for their ability to respond quickly to variable renewable input, but because of certain design issues, suffer in the durability department. There are also issues to be studied concerning the integration of electrolyzers with renewable resources or potentially using curtailed grid electricity, which could impose rapid demands for ramping up and ramping down production, which are hard on the currently existing suite of electrolyzer technologies. So examples of projects that we would consider in this space would be those that look at electrolyzer optimization and also controls for direct coupling with variable renewable resources, which could have or make very large physical demands of currently existing electrolyzer technologies. Integration of electrolysis systems with energy storage technologies like batteries, for example, to be able to produce hydrogen when energy might not otherwise be available from renewables. We're also interested in high temperature solid oxide electrolysis systems that use a clean thermal energy source. The advantage from these solid oxide systems being that in their optimal operation ranges, which are at high temperatures, the electrical efficiency for these systems can actually be quite high. Also interested in advancement in electrode, membrane, or catalyst technologies to enhance component and system durability and lifetime. And finally, given New York's interest in offshore wind and developing that particular resource off our coast, there is a potential for producing hydrogen greenly and through electrolysis close to that source of energy. And if there are projects interested in investigating saltwater capable electrolysis, either by coupling electrolysis with water derived or cleaned through some reverse osmosis process or through direct electrolysis of seawater, those would also be within the scope of this solicitation. So next slide, please. Now we come to our third challenge area, mitigation of nitrous oxides from hydrogen combustion. So though we are interested in looking at hydrogen for industrial application, which does involve its combustion, and while this process is carbon-free, there is the potential to produce nitrogen oxide emissions, and this has been a concern raised by various stakeholders, a very valid concern. And though within the confines of our climate law and our scoping plan, though electrification and renewables will be the path moving forward, there are sectors of our economy that will be hard to abate, like industry, large-scale cogeneration or district heating, where finding electrification solutions will remain difficult and where the scoping plan acknowledges a limited need for a limited potential need for hydrogen combustion technologies, provided that care is taken to manage the production of NOx emissions. And in light of that, even though NOx emissions control technologies are already well understood for fossil fuel combustion processes, there's still much to be learned when it comes to combustion of pure hydrogen gas and how to control NOx emissions from said processes. And we're interested in developing opportunities to explore how to do that. So as far as available NOx control options, there are changes that can be made directly to combustion processes. For example, controlling your air to fuel ratio and other parameters to minimize the production of NOx. And there are also post-production selective catalytic treatments similar to the catalytic converters in our cars that could be deployed for these purposes as well. But we want these solutions in the hydrogen space. So example projects that would be eligible under this solicitation include combustor technology or advanced combustion controls or optimization of combustion processes to minimize NOx emissions. As I mentioned before, post-combustion cleanup and treatment. Again, example here, selective catalytic reduction. Studies demonstrating the cost performance trade-offs, minimizing NOx emissions. So it would be very important to know going forward, and demonstration projects that test the performance and effectiveness of NOx control and mitigation strategies in actual real-world hydrogen combustion systems. Next slide, please. And finally, we come to our final challenge area, hydrogen storage technologies for bulk storage and limited footprint areas. So as we had mentioned earlier in this talk, and as I had mentioned just a slide or two ago, New York is aggressively pursuing increasing the footprint of renewables in their electricity supply. And as those goals are achieved, we will encounter potential issues with grid reliability from these variable renewable resources, and we'll need adequate storage technologies to bridge that gap. And hydrogen could be an important solution in this front, particularly for long duration energy storage technologies. And just to illustrate the challenge we're facing on this front and how hydrogen could play a role in helping us solve this, we have a very convenient load figure here in the slide that I have taken from the energy storage roadmap, where we show the load on the grid in a challenging winter week in 2040. And we'll see that the load here is this black line here, and then these other lines correspond to renewable and other baseload generation capacity during the winter. And this gray area essentially represents the gap between the renewable production and baseload resources that we do have and what would be needed to meet the load in a difficult winter week. And we could do this with battery technologies, but hydrogen could potentially play a very important role here. Namely, if we could produce it during times of peak seasonal demand, let's say in periods of peak seasonal production, let's say in the warmer spring and summer months, and then dispatch that in the winter months to meet this peak demand, hydrogen could prove to be very useful in that respect. And the roadmap also acknowledges this as well, recognizing that in addition to the 17 gigawatts of battery storage we need to manage these short-term fluctuations in the order of 4 to 8 hours, we'd also need 18 gigawatts of firm capacity, which is modeled as hydrogen in the study to meet needs longer than 8 hours. So in order to do this, storing hydrogen becomes of paramount importance. And the challenges on this front are mainly due to the low volumetric energy density of hydrogen gas, which currently requires high pressures or energy-intensive liquefaction for compact storage, or potentially large spaces for meeting seasonal demand, like geologic bulk storage. So in light of these challenges, some example projects to address these issues that we'd be interested in are assessing the feasibility or potential extent and cost of storage in existing either onshore or offshore geologic formations in New York, materials-based storage technologies, think here metal hydrides or metal organic frameworks, which could in theory store hydrogen gas at much higher percent weight or contents or in much smaller volumetric footprints, but where their use is currently precluded by the need to operate them well outside of ambient temperature ranges. Demonstration of physical hydrogen storage media, for example, typical liquefaction or compression, that increase the volumetric energy density while also reducing the cost associated with materials needed for those high pressure and liquefaction storage processes. In addition to that, we're also interested in looking at chemical carriers, for example, ammonia, that could easily and reversibly store or release hydrogen for long duration storage. So next slide, please. And that concludes our overview of the technical component of the solicitation and also the content of our webinar as well. And we'll be happy to move on to answering questions.
All right, thank you, Fernando. So I'm gonna just start to read out the questions that have been submitted and the answer. Again, if you have questions, please type your questions in the chat window. We'll respond here with the panelists available now. So first question is back to Fernando. How many days in a row will dispatchable generators need to perform? These questions come from Scott Butler from Con Edison. Fernando, you want to address that?
Hi, Scott. Thanks for your question. My understanding of how to answer that comes from the roadmap and the way they tackled that question, or deciding what number to choose as a threshold was by running these loss of load simulations. And I think in the course of running those simulations, in the absence of any firm generation resources, so assuming renewable build out in the state proceeding to meet its climate goals in the absence of that generation capacity or that storage capacity, understanding what the distribution of loss of load events was. And they found that to ensure or that loss of load events greater than 100 hours, the chances of those happening were under 5%. Or similarly, the reliability threshold becomes greater than 95%. So that 100-hour mark was chosen as the threshold for the study for building either battery systems or zero carbon firm capacity to meet long-term needs.
All right, thank you, Fernando. There's another question asking about, is there a cost share requirement? So for that, we have the cost share requirement in the solicitation. And John, if you could please flip to page 9, I will put that cost share requirement on the screen again. Yes. Next, page 9 is the table cost share requirement. Next page, John, please. Next. Next.
Hi, and I don't have the page numbers. You're just gonna have to tell me where to go.
Okay, it doesn't matter. Maybe, yeah. So just there's a table says.
Is it forward or backwards?
Next, forward.
Just keep saying go.
Yeah, keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Yes, thank you. Yeah. On this page, there's a table. Basically, it's the same table from the solicitation summary. Based on which category of project, whether it's a feasibility study or product requirement or demonstration project, we have specified the maximum NYSERDA funding award, the dollar amount. This is on this page. As I mentioned before, there's no percentage requirement, but that's the maximum amount of funding you can get from NYSERDA for cost share. Hopefully that answers the question. There's a question which pretty common that coming into the PON email before. Would NYSERDA funding be available to match the Hydrogen Hub Award? So for this question, the answer is no, for various reasons. First of all, we require you to send the concept paper that you submit to DOE. Typically for a hydrogen hub project, because it's part of the big hub project, you will not have the concept paper just for the project you're asking for the cost share. under this PON. Secondary, the hydrogen hub focus on the commercial deployment project, while this PON, we focus on the R&D technology development type of project. Thirdly, the DOE hydrogen hub time scale is not going to meet this particular PON. You're going to have to get funding from DOE for the first phase, which will take time before the actual funding for development is arrived. So it won't meet this particular NYSERDA funding timeline. So the answer is, if you want to use the hydrogen hub award as the project, it won't fit under this PON. Let's see, other questions. So there's a question, a non-New York entity and does not currently have a presence in New York. But as part of our project, we plan to build storage facility in New York. Are we eligible to apply as lead participant, or do we need to submit a sub-recipient? So again, I mentioned this in the presentation and also explained clearly in the solicitation. So if you are not US entity, when you submit the proposal, then your project, it will need to be a demonstration project, and the demonstration project site need to be in New York. In that case, a non-New York based entity can submit as a prime to this PON. If that's not the case, then you need to be a US entity, or you need to submit as a primary, as a sub. So you would have to partner with a New York entity to submit to this PON. Is this funding only used to cover the cost share for a DOE award? In other words, if I have a DOE award and the cost share is 300K, so I can only apply for 300K for this opportunity, or can I apply for more? Well, this funding is only available to cover the cost share for federal award. If your cost share to DOE is only 300K, then you can only apply for 300K, even though our NYSERDA maximum amount is more than 300K. Again, this is because this funding is specifically set up to provide a cost share to DOE or other federal agency funding opportunity. The purpose is for New York to leverage federal investment in the hydrogen space to speed up the development in New York and to encourage the development in the areas that we are interested in the hydrogen space. Is there a dollar amount from NYSERDA award going to be less than or equal to the federal funding? Can there be more? Well, I think my answer to the previous like federal cost share amount answers that, right? If your cost share to federal is a certain amount, that's the maximum you can get. Plus, there's also a cap NYSERDA can fund, even though your cost share to federal funding is more. Are combustion and storage for aviation applications eligible for this funding opportunity? I'll let Fernando answer this question.
Was that the question regarding aviation?
Yes, question number 9.
Okay, I would say that depends specifically on the nature of the chemical carrier involved. I will say combustion for aviation as a topic is outside the scope of the solicitation. But if there's a storage component that would be eligible, but it would have to be a technology where storing or retrieving that energy doesn't involve the production of CO2, carbon emissions. So something like ammonia would be in scope for us, but something like methanol would not.
All right, thank you, Fernando. Next question, are proposals from New York-based entity for pilot outside of New York eligible? let us get back to you on this. The way we write the proposal is that believe the answer is yes. If you are a New York entity, New York-based entity, you are eligible to apply for the funding. The site specifically need to be in New York is for the non-New York entity based to apply for this funding. I believe that's what we explained in the solicitation document. We submit a concept hydrogen project to NYSERDA in conjunction of another partner for the DOE hub submittal. How do we find out this project still being pursued by NYSERDA or whether it's eligible for this grant? Well, either way, either you include it as a hub project. I explained before the hub project, you will not be able to meet the requirement for this hub, for this PON. Or you're not part of the hub project, you're not selected, then you would have to have some other federal funding that you apply for this PON for the cost share. In terms of how do you find out, and this is beyond the scope of this, how to find out whether you selected, whether you included by the hub or not, that's beyond this webinar to explain. Next question, can companies partner on this solicitation? If so, would it be possible to receive a list of participants of this webinar? Or can we provide an email to NYSERDA that can be distributed to the participants seeking their interest in partnering up? Well, I will pass this question to Craig to answer this.
Thanks, Hannah. Generally, we encourage all interested parties to partner up and think about how they can collaborate. But we would have to check with Colleen and others, Hannah, before we would publish a list of attendees or anything like that. But I do think that there are tremendous opportunities across the state to interact with different partners across the entire supply chain, from manufacturers to research organizations and things like that. And we're looking into more and more how we can support that partnering, and we'll have to get back to whether or not we would publish an attendee list or not.
Thank you, Craig.
Yep.
Next question, does recruitment apply to the NYSERDA co-funding? Well, it's explained in the solicitation that this recruitment requirement is only for the product development category, which is category B. For other category A and C, that's not applicable. Next question, number 15, for Fernando to answer. Does the production of hydrogen only include the electrochemical production of hydrogen? Would hydrogen from biomass qualify for this PON? Fernando, please.
Yes, for the sake of this PON, we're only considering electrolytic hydrogen from renewable resources under that hydrogen production challenge area. So biogenic sources of hydrogen or anything that requires reforming of something like renewable natural gas would be out of scope.
All right, thank you, Fernando. Next question about cost share and partnering. Can this program cover the cost share for partnering university, which are not in New York State? The lead institute is in New York State. Yes, this is one of the scenarios we explained. As long as the leading proposer is in New York, you can include other sub as other subs can be non-US New York State entities. That's fine. Well, there's a question about can the submission date be extended? So currently the submission date is the June 28th. We set up this date because that's the date we believe, as far as we understand, the active federal funding that has the scope covered by this PON should already be due before proposals due or concept papers due. So since all we asking mostly is what you submit to DOE with some supplement question that you need to answer for this PON, we think the date, although tight, should work. However, we'll leave that option open if that's necessary. For now, the due date is as specified in the solicitation. Currently, it is not the plan to extend it. So please prepare the solicitation based on the due date specified in the solicitation. For clarification, if you have a federally fully funded project or submitted a proposal currently under review, but have met the cost share, you cannot use this hydrogen PON to increase your cost share to 30%, for example. I'm not quite sure your question. The cost share amount, how much you need to provide a cost share for, that's defined by the federal funding that you're applying for, right? So if you have not submitted your federal funding, and you are in the middle of considering how much you need to go exceed their federal funding minimum cost share, then you probably can consider that, how much you want. But I don't think NYSERDA decide how much cost share you submit to DOE. It is your decision. We only specify there's a cap NYSERDA provide, and you have to submit to a DOE or other federal funding and meet all these criteria and other requirements we specify in this solicitation. All right, any other questions? Please submit it to the window and I will answer as they go. At this moment, I don't see any new question. All right, question is about does existing relevant DOE or Department of Defense or Department of Navy funding count if we can logically use this PON to accomplish additional tasks that extend the original funded work and directly address one of the challenge areas. So please send this question to us to this PON 5322. We will answer that question there. And also just a reminder, any questions we did not answer today real time, a list of frequently asked questions. That list will be published early next week. That's the plan under this PON solicitation website where you find the other solicitation requirement. So please check back there while we add additional answers to some of the questions we did not answer today, or any additional questions coming to our PON email box after this webinar today. There are questions asking whether national labs are eligible to apply for the NYSERDA PON. Yes, the answer is yes. National labs are eligible to apply for NYSERDA PON 5322. don't remember if there was a question asking if the entity is a sub-recipient to a federal funding, can they apply for cost share under this PON? The answer is no. You need to be the prime recipient for a federal funding in order for you to apply for this particular PON to get the cost share. Okay, please keep submitting questions as we still have some time left, a few minutes. All right, still have a couple minutes left, a few minutes left, but at this moment, I don't see any additional questions coming to the chat window, or there are a couple of questions we need to get back to you later on. There's a question about would funding allocated for the national lab by DOE count as federal funding? Yes, if the funding comes from DOE and it's located to national labs such as Emerald, then that's also the federal funding. So that also qualifies. I just want to make sure that I emphasize that the funding that you get from, let's say, National Lab, that funding needs to be 100% coming from DOE. So this is for the federal cost share. So if the National Lab get funding from some other competitive award, and the funding part of the National Lab's funding is not the federal agency, then that won't qualify. Please repeat the PON 53 email address. Okay. Get back to that page. So John, if you could please go to page 4 of the slides today. So if you don't mind, go to the title page and just flip 3 pages down. That is the important page showing the email address and the website that attendees today would like to know. Yes, so this page here shows that the important website or the email address you want to keep in mind. The NYSERDA Clean Hydrogen program page is the first one at the top. From there, you can actually find everything else. But I want to emphasize today's FAQ list will be posted by early next week on the PON solicitation detail page. That page you can also find from our Clean Hydrogen program page. But that's also the same page you find all the solicitation requirement, including a link for you to submit proposals. And the email that you want to submit additional questions, that's pom5322@nyserda.my.gov. Again, I want to emphasize again, some people join late. If you or your colleagues want to see today's slides or want to listen to the video again, we plan to put that on the Clean Hydrogen website, which is the first link on this page, sometime next week. You can go there to find the slides and find the recording. Okay, so there's a question about, on the previous page, we list some examples of DOE fundings. This question says all but one of the DOE funding examples shown on the slides today have closed with full applications. This means by definition that the cost share requirement would have been met. Can you please elaborate on how a fully submitted application to DOE would be eligible, given that it already has met the cost share requirement? Okay, so the cost share seems to be confusing. So to explain that, if you have already submitted the full proposals, you already committed some kind of cost share to DOE. What you can do is you send all the required document as laid out in this solicitation. And you apply for this NYSERDA PON. You ask NYSERDA to see if we can provide you the cost share up to the amount we specified, up to the amount you sent to DOE. If you get selected and awarded by NYSERDA, that means whatever your cost share you committed to DOE, NYSERDA will cover that. The reason we want to do that is we want to encourage the R&D development in the 4 challenge areas that we specified. We want to support the New York entities or New York project for those R&D areas. We also potentially want to use our funding to speed up the development in that areas by leverage federal funding. I hope that is clear. Yeah, but if you already submit the full proposal, I want to emphasize, read the solicitation again. We're not asking you to send more than 100 pages of full proposal to us. We're only asking you to submit what is your concept paper, your additional supporting documents, such as you are awarded, or at least your concept paper being selected, and other critical important supporting documents like support letter by critical partners, etc. Or if your contract's already signed, then send the award letter to us. All right. 2 more minutes left. Let's see any other questions that we can answer today. All right, to wrap up today's call, there were quite a number of questions about the hub project versus the R&D project. I would like to emphasize that today's PON 5322, we are focusing on the technical R&D development. The hydrogen hub project, which seems to be a lot of you are involved, those hydrogen hub projects that DOE fund, they are focused on the commercial deployment project. That is the hub project focus. This PON is focused on the R&D side. I want to make sure we understand the distinction between these two. That's why on the previous page, when we share what are the example of federal funding, those listed there, they are for the R&D purpose. Okay, so hopefully that made it clear. Plus, there are other reasons the hydrogen hub project will not be able to qualify under this PON. Okay, 1 minute left. I just want to thank everyone to join this webinar. I also want to ask if my colleague, either Fernando or Craig, you have any final words to say to the audience before we wrap up today's webinar.
No, nothing else on my part other than thank you for your time and for listening in. And hopefully if there's anything unanswered, we can help sort that out for you in the coming weeks.
I'll just add, thank you all for attending today. I will pass it back to you to wrap us up.
All right, thank you. Thanks a lot for your support, and we are passionate about R&D development in New York. We want to leverage the funding. As I said, we leverage the federal funding to speed up and to encourage the development in the 4 challenge areas that New York State think is important for the R&D purpose. So thank you all. Here are the contact to keep connected. Thank you. Bye now.